Hello everyone, this is Sumon Molla Selim, welcoming all of you again in today's episode of Classroom Presents the Tech Talk. And as you guys have already seen that this week we are talking about mainly Laravel. Yesterday we had a guest where we talked about like REST API development with Laravel, and today we have another guest, and today's discussion topic is e-commerce development with Laravel. So I hope that the audience, you guys have already started to join us, and we will add our guest here today. And yeah, let's add our guest Attila Fulop to our session, and we can first we'll discuss about get to know that what Attila is doing, have some introduction, and during the session we'll start talk about e-commerce development and what are the solutions available right now in the industry, and how Laravel can help us to develop a good e-commerce solution. So yeah, I'll add Attila to the session now. So hi Attila, hope you can see me.
Yes, good morning, evening, afternoon, everyone.
Yeah, because people from different time zones are attending our session, so it's safe to greet them with every possible ways. So how are you doing now?
Yeah, doing well. Thank you very much. We had a beautiful day today. Temperatures rising in Berlin, so all good.
That's
so
great.
let me.
Yeah, you can introduce yourself to the audience.
So again, my name is Attila Fulop. I live in Berlin, same place as Sumon. I mean, not the same apartment, but the same city. And currently, I work as a team lead. Also, a little bit still as a web developer as my daytime job. And in the last 10 years, I have been focusing on e-commerce development, mainly with PHP, but mostly rather full stack, and also part of the infrastructure part, which we call today DevOps, and also some parts in Node.js. So not exclusively PHP, but I would say that's the focus. So yeah. And lately, I'm really involved with Laravel-related activities, but how to say, I'm not a exclusively Laravel person. But yeah, that's my that's the framework I know the best.
Okay, that's great to know. And yeah, like as we have already like disclosed that today we'll mainly talk about e-commerce development with Laravel, because I've seen like that in the industry, or I would say like most of the developers nowadays, e-commerce is becoming popular and there's lots of other solutions available, but sometimes it becomes tough for the developer to choose like what solutions they would choose, the technology stack, language, and there's lots of CMSs also available right now in the market. So it's a tough, I would say, for a developer to choose like which solution should I use for e-commerce development. So we may like start our discussion about e-commerce like that. What are the difference between a normal website and e-commerce website, and what are the possible solutions we can think of? So Attila, you can start like what are the like how a website is different between normal website and e-commerce.
All right, so I usually define e-commerce as obviously most of the website want to sell something, but many sites, they don't want to sell directly. They are mainly used for marketing purposes. So like content-based websites, which is very well known for, like LogRocket or DigitalOcean is doing. They are doing a very, very strong content marketing. Obviously, they want to sell, but we still don't call these sites e-commerce sites. So we talk about e-commerce site, even though I think it's still very obvious for everyone. But mostly people think about e-commerce as something which has a cart and you are buying physical goods. But basically, e-commerce can be anything that where you can sell directly. So that's the, I think for me, the e-commerce, that's the most important part, that it directly sells. It has a direct channel to sell something, and it not only includes Amazon-like websites and Shopify-like website, but also it can include whenever you're selling content. So like whenever you're selling e-learning based materials, and events can be part of e-commerce. And yeah, so it's a versatile business, but obviously the typical sites are the card-based ones, which are selling physical goods or digital goods. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like there's lots of like types of e-commerce available. I can sell my courses. There could be digital services, consultancy services. I see that there's also some websites where people can sell like mentoring services also. And again, there's also websites like Amazon, and e-commerce can also differ in various aspects. Like there could be a single vendor e-commerce, there could be multi-vendor e-commerce, and in some cases in e-commerce we also need like couple of other modules also, like inventory management module, stock management. But you already said that the main module could be like it's a website where people can browse services, products or goods, and they can add it to a shopping cart and buy it. But yeah, so we know that there's lots of like available solutions available, so we maybe can discuss about the available solutions that are available in the market right now.
Okay, so when we are talking about the types of e-commerce, I made so the categorization which I will mention here is it's more like the nature of the software. How does it work, or like the complexity? So maybe the most simple one which you can have is like just a shopping cart software, and think about it in a way that, for example, you have a website and you just want to sell some swags like t-shirts or mugs or whatever, and it's basically your site or whatever you're doing is not really e-commerce, but you want to have it as an addition. And it's a very simple solution. You can just use some super simple shopping cart software. So that's maybe the first thing. The second one is whenever you have a full-blown CMS and you have an add-on as you have an e-commerce add-on. A typical example could be WordPress and WooCommerce, Drupal plus Drupal Commerce, or also MarketPress and Cart66. So this is when you this is a viable solution also for a full-blown e-commerce. I saw big companies going with WooCommerce. I mean, big means really they are selling a lot, and it's also a viable solution. So especially for people who are really good with WordPress, it works. So the third type of e-commerce software is I call them e-commerce applications. I will go to details how to differentiate them from frameworks and platforms. But first, the e-commerce application is something like, maybe if I have to go super simple, I would say someone created a web shop and is available for download. So it is someone's web shop. But this is very black and white. So the major characteristics of these e-commerce applications are that the components and the framework are bundled together. So in this case, with the framework, the MVC framework is together with the application, and also the shop engine and your shop logic is not decoupled or less decoupled. So that means you download the application and contains everything. So therefore, you download this e-commerce application and you start tweaking directly the engine. So the good example is like Zencart, or a newer player is Bagisto. They are also more like an e-commerce application. You download, it contains the composer file and everything, and you just install, and it installs the framework as well. This is also good. The fourth type of e-commerce software is so-called e-commerce frameworks, which is basically the major difference from applications, e-commerce applications, is that the framework is something you add to an existing MVC framework. So let me phrase it again. You already have so you own the MVC application. Like you create a Laravel application as an example, or a Symfony application, and you want to either add e-commerce functionality to it, or you start with that, but it's you who builds the application, and you bring in the framework as a composer dependency. And that means that the e-commerce library or the components, they live in the vendor folder. So they are separate, and they are not part of your application. Of course, they are dependencies of your application. So the major difference is that the app is fully under your control, similarly to MVC applications, to MVC, any other MVC application. But you don't directly modify the core. Therefore, you can also keep updating the core of the application because you don't directly modify it. So actually, my framework falls into this category, but a similar one is if you use Symfony, you can use Cilius. That's a very similar e-commerce framework. Also for Laravel, there is our framework called Vanilla, and also Amius in the years became something like this. The next big category is, I think this is one of the best known ones, is these are so-called e-commerce platforms. So they are mainly sharing both characteristics of e-commerce applications and e-commerce frameworks. Common with the e-commerce application is that the MVC framework and the e-commerce components are bundled together. So as an example, Magento 2.3 is bundled with Zend Framework 2.7, or Orocommerce 4.1 is bundled with Symfony 4.4. That means these platforms are also bringing in, just give you an example. Vanilla you can use with Laravel 5.5, 5.8, 6, 7. But if you want to use Magento, you must use Zend 2.7. But obviously, it's not a problem. It's just a characteristic of this feature. So the difference from applications like e-commerce application is that you can't, or at least you shouldn't, tweak the code directly. So when you use Magento, basically with Magento, you can update the application via the admin interface. Therefore, if you override the core, then at the next update, it just goes away. And also very important trait of e-commerce platform is that they are full of features. They're really, really full of features. So they contain mostly everything you need for an e-commerce shop. Plus, they are designed to be open enough so that they are extendable with plugins. So the best example, I think, for this e-commerce platform is Magento, or which is using Zend framework, or Spryker, which is also a Symfony-based one, or Orocommerce, which is Symfony application again. I would like to mention like two more categories. One is that this is relatively new. Like relative is like in the last 5 years, but they are e-commerce APIs. So these kind of softwares are specialized APIs for e-commerce. So this is just the pure backend part of your e-commerce system, and it doesn't contain anything front-end. You can add, these are typically used either with mobile applications or with SPAs. So you can use something like Vue Storefront or develop yourself a React application in front of it, but mostly the backend is already there. And these solutions typically include an admin interface as well. So you already have everything you need, and then you can decide how you will display all these systems on the front end. A good example is for this kind of system is Molten, or commercetools.com, or Kibo, or schema.io. So they are flexible enough that you can tweak them, but basically they only provide you an API. I would say the last kind of last software family is which is e-commerce SaaS. So this is basically the same as platforms, as e-commerce platform, but they are hosted. So that's a major difference, that this is hosted, and you typically cannot host it yourself, but this is somebody else is running it for you. Shopify is like this, BigCommerce, Verution, or Soldigo. There are a couple of examples which are fall in this category. They are also extendable, of course. So you can tweak your templates, you can tweak the front end, and you can do many things. But basically, you don't really own the code. You just have APIs, webhooks, and so on and so on. So these are the softwares, but I would like to add plus one here. And the plus one is not a software, but it's more like I would say ready-made places where you can sell. So Amazon is a typical example. Very often people come to us and ask, okay, we would like to have an e-commerce, we would like to sell this and that. We have this kind of product or that kind of product. And we want a web shop. So they already have a design and stuff like that. And I tell them, okay, but where do you want to sell? And they say, like whole Europe. Okay, so will you take care of all the logistics and stuff? Then why don't you just go to Amazon and sell on Amazon? So this is I think the nature of softwares also shows the how colorful the different needs and applications are. So if you want to sell like a handmade product, then go to Etsy. If you want to sell e-learning materials, go to Thinkific or Teachable. If you want to sell in Central Eastern Europe, then go to Emag, because you are already covered. So they take care of marketing and all the stuff. So yeah, this is obviously it's worth to mention that sometimes we have to think about it, whether we really need to develop or write code for an app or for an e-commerce business, because I would say mostly not.
Yeah, because like there's lots of solutions already available, and if like one of those meets your need, you can like already use those solution instead of like reinventing the wheels. But if there's any specific requirements that you are not getting from those available solutions, then like it comes to like, yes, you need your own solutions, maybe customize those things or like code your own solutions. So right now, as we come to talk about like code your own solutions, so now I think you can share a bit about like Vanilla, why and how you started creating it, and what was your motivation behind it.
Yeah. Okay. So at my the whole thing started at my previous company, and basically that company was is an agency specialized for e-commerce. And who were our clients? Typically, they were businesses who wanted to have something special or had something special already. So, as an example, we used to work with a big e-commerce company, bankrupt since then. They used to have 150 physical stores, and basically their online business was an addition in 2006. It's like 14 years ago. And obviously that time there was just a guy who started to write and throw on top of each other PHP code and HTML and CSS and SQL and everything. So after a while they realized that the business is really, really big. It's running on a huge volume. Yeah. But the system what they had was not manageable. So it was a classic legacy and spaghetti code. Legacy in the meaning of it contained a lot of that code and a lot of logic which was no longer true in the business. Obviously, technically, it was also old, but yeah. So that was that, and spaghetti is like a classic one. So for them, you cannot just go to Shopify from one day to the other. Yeah. Or obviously for them, it was no choice to sell on Amazon because they were like a local Amazon in the respective country.
They are a platform themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was the case. And later they went to a multi-vendor marketplace and so on and so on. So how I would say they were already really coupled with their software. And that so we took it over in 2013, and we had to shape it into something manageable from the code perspective. Obviously, they were asking for features because that's what businesses do. They were asking for performance, and because that's what businesses do. So they were asking for all those features. So yeah, that was in 2013. That time we didn't really use Laravel. I don't even know if maybe it was like Laravel 2, so it was out of scope. And that time I was just away from Symfony as well, because when Symfony switched from version 1 to version 2, I didn't make this switch. So yeah, nevertheless, these kind of businesses require coded solutions. So we were coders that time. We've been coders, and we've been coding this application, and there was no really opportunity to go anything else but to take the existing code base and rework it during the years. So I would say that was our business that time, and yeah, most of our customers were this kind of businesses. We used to work with Magento, that's true, and Magento was, I would say, the platform is really capable. But how you can work with Magento, I think anyone who's listening and has ever worked with Magento, I doubt there's anyone who won't puke. because I never ever heard a single person saying, yeah, Magento is so cool, I like to work with it. Everybody hates it. So but on the other end, so that's a credit to Magento. That was the system where I learned the foundations of OOP-based PHP. So that time back, there were no namespaces, and Magento and Zend framework, especially, they were particularly the ones who introduced this kind of concepts. Yeah. So long story short, let's go to Vanilla. So we used to do these homegrown solutions. We've been using Yi framework, Symfony framework, Falcon framework, depending on the case, and we started to work with the Silius framework back in 2014-15. I don't exactly remember the year, and it was quite promising compared to anything else we had that time, because it was Symfony. It was fresh. It was good. You could customize it and stuff. And in 2016, I guess we were forced into Laravel. I mean, forced means there was a client, and there was a technical PM, and he said, "Yeah, we do it with Laravel." And we said, "Okay, let's do it with Laravel." So we opened the Laravel website, and we saw what static calls the fuck, and we just saying. So I would say around 2 or 3 months, we were just. Constantly talking about Laravel, that it's bad, why is it doing this, why is it doing that? And after a while, we just realized that actually we learned Laravel, and there was some dogmas especially about testing and statics and stuff, which were really, really prevalent in Symfony world. And we just realized that it has a lot of features, like how does it handle the queues, all these backend jobs, background jobs, asynchronicity with Laravel is really cool. And so I could just go into details, but basically we realized that we can work really, really well with Laravel. So the same client started another business next year, and the same PM told us, okay, we go with Laravel. So basically that year we built up from scratch within 9 months a complete e-commerce business with Laravel. And that was a time when I already saw that, okay, so how many times will we start writing e-commerce systems from scratch?
Right. Yeah.
And then I realized, okay, this is something I don't want to do again, because but I want to work with Laravel because it's really cool. It has a lot of features which make writing applications really, really good. We still kept using Symfony, so we didn't forget it. It's not a Laravel versus Symfony duel. But that time we were more okay. We decided, okay, let's go with Laravel. Let's call it our primary tool. And then mostly we decide, okay, let's do something which we can, with kind of a boilerplate code. Next time when we have to start from scratch, we don't have to start from scratch. We have to start from, I don't know, like from the level 1 or level 2. And that was the point where we decided, okay, let's do this vanilla thingy, because it consists of a couple of e-commerce components, like the classic ones. You know, you want the product, you want the cart, you want the checkout, you want to categorize your products, you want inventory, you want multiple languages, you want orders, you want shipments, you want payments. This is typical in every e-commerce application, regardless of if you're selling physical or digital goods. Yeah, inventory is not for digital goods, but yeah. Basically, that's the story about it. And of course, we didn't start with writing an e-commerce framework. We were actively looking for solutions. And it was back in end of 2016, early 2017, I guess. And then I would say we spent 1 year with do it or not do it, do it or not do it. And because, you know, it's stupid to write another e-commerce framework.
Yeah, like at that time when you started, what version of Laravel was it, and were there like any kind of framework like that? Or we know that there's always some kind of packages available, but those doesn't actually have much features, or sometimes the leftover doesn't have updates, this kind of thing.
Yeah, so back in 17, there was basically a couple of abandoned packages for Laravel, and there was one which is called Amios, which is still around. I would say our problem that time with Amios was that the author of Amios that time wanted to have a multi-framework e-commerce. So he wanted to make it for multiple frameworks because it worked with Laravel, it worked with Symfony, and I think also with Typo3. So it was targeted for a couple of frameworks, and therefore it wasn't Laravel native. And that was I would say that was the biggest concern about it, that we don't really want to tweak and layers have layers of software which are just there in order to support anything else but Laravel, anything else than Laravel. So we wanted to have just Laravel. That was the aim. And then we said, okay, let's do it one last time, and then we can go with it. And yeah, so this is like one of those major the major idea behind is that it's native to Laravel, and it deviates from Laravel as little as possible. There are some deviations, though. I will talk about it later, or I would say some custom solutions. But basically, you work with eloquent models. You work with
like available Laravel features that their queues.
Yeah, exactly. Everything it hooks into the configuration layer. It uses the cache and so on and so on. So you can use all those things. So yeah.
Can we discuss more about like what are the modules or features that is available now in Vanilla, or how the whole framework structured is done?
Yeah. Okay. Wait a sec. Okay. So just back for one sentence: when is Vanilla good, or when it is not? So first of all, I think it is good if you are a developer. That's very important, because it's obviously not for
like end users or
so business owners will plan to roll out a SaaS, but that's a different topic, because right now we talk about the open source framework. The second thing is you want to work with PHP and Laravel, because if you don't care about that, if you don't care about PHP or Laravel, then you can go, because there are many good solutions. And I have to admit, Laravel Vanilla is still a young one, So it doesn't contain all the features, and it's not a super mature framework, although it's usable, it's being used in production. But if you, let's say, you don't care if it's Java or Ruby or PHP or Node.js, then it doesn't matter. If you really want to work with Laravel, then Vanilla is a good option for you. The other topic is that maybe you want to work with Laravel, but you don't want to you don't want to control everything. So in this case, the one of the topics and one of the aims or goals of Laravel of Vanilla is that you just install your application, you open your Laravel application, you write it yourself, and you only write the business logic, which is specific for you. But you can control entirely, because all the views, how you display your application, all the controllers, all the models, everything is yours. The Vanilla only contains an admin which contains controllers, but nothing like that is included in the framework. And if you fully want to control the logic, the models, and all the look and feel, then it's also a good option. If you don't care about that so much, then again, there are likely better options than this. So that means the goal of it is that it's fully customizable. Even you can completely replace or just omit modules. So if you don't like how the order module works, you don't have to use it. You can go without the order module and write the order module yourself, because it can be that it's mostly it's a generic one, and we intentionally keep the number of features low, because we don't want to make it super special. We want to do that. What is common in every e-commerce application or e-commerce system, it's there. And then if you have to add more fields to your models, or more logic, or more pivot tables and stuff, then you can do it yourself. You don't have to write it from scratch. So one more thing to know is that if you are a microservices addict, then don't come here, because it's a modular monolith. So it's not the whole thing is modular, meaning that cart is not coupled to checkout, and the order is not coupled to cart and checkout and stuff like that, because we saw it in many e-commerce frameworks or systems that basically there's a temptation that, well, a cart is really looks like an order, and the checkout really looks like an order and the cart, and so they are using the same tables and the same models there. I mean, it's may or may not be good for you. So that for this thing, all the components, all the modules are separated, and yeah. So this way, basically, there are two major ways how you can use it. You can just add specific components to your application, or you can use the entire framework. The entire framework means that it's like a glue package which brings in all the modules, and it also adds the admin interface. But if you don't like the admin, what it has by default, or you want to plug it into another admin system like Laravel Nova, you don't have to use the full-blown framework. You just bring in the components you like, and then you can start using them.
So the components are like, I would say, standalone packages. So whatever, like maybe cart, or I only need the cart, so I can only get that and add it in our Laravel application. So it depends on the developers need that, how much of these components they need, and if they want like all of it, they can just get the full framework from Vanilla.
Yeah, exactly. So like the most important components are, I would say, the customer addresses. So addresses are actually a nice topic just in themselves. We found it that many times it's super easy to oversee that we have to deal with addresses, but different countries have different territorial units, and some countries, if you want to order something and you must specify your county, or you must specify your state, or so the zip
there
codes are really
lots of
different.
variations.
Yeah, so therefore, this is also in the addresses module. I think we have like 4 or 5 different models, and they are not even super easy, I would say. So that is also there. Obviously, this is also something, if you don't like or it's too complex for you, just throw it out. So there is a product module, of course. There is a product properties, which is basically the custom attributes. It's very easy to define custom attributes. If you don't want them to be separate fields in your table, then you can just easily add custom attributes to your products. So there is a categorization module, of course, which you can use not just for categories, but for brands or, so this is basically, it's more like a taxonomy module. And then there is a cart module, channels, checkout, orders, and payments and shipping, which are basically just shipping in the upcoming version because they were not there yet. And if you are using the admin area, it is also covers users. The users are also just built on top of Laravel. So there's nothing special about it. Basically, your user is an app user, nothing special, but it contains a couple of additions like you can distinguish between admin users, customers, like clients, and also API users for authentication. And it also contains an ACL module, settings which you can define for your application, or preferences for your customers. That's also there. And so that these are the major components of the framework at the moment.
Like, is there any payment gateway integration in your framework, or you just think like that it should be separated and it's up to the developer how they want to implement it?
I would say there is none yet at the moment. I mean, in master there is, but there is none in I think the release branches. Basically, payments is a it's a super basic feature, but it's still it's only rolling out right now. There will be a couple of payment gateways implemented in the first round, but basically the payment the payment module is made exactly in order to you can easily add your own whatever payment gateway you would like to use. But Stripe and Braintree will be there in the first round, and PayPal.
That's great. That's great, because we know there's also, if we think about it, it's kind of like a extension on top of Laravel. So there's already lots of extensions or packages available that you can use with Laravel. So I think it would be easier to add new gateways there. Maybe they just need to follow the convention that how you are adding or gluing these payment gateways into your vanilla system.
Yeah, so basically, if you want to bring in an external library, which is already supporting that kind of thing, what you can do is, so I would say there is a contracts package. This is also an idea taken from Laravel framework itself. And the contract package contains interfaces. So what you have to do is you need to do either a bridge class or extend the existing one if it's possible, but you have to implement that interface. You have to implement a payment gateway. There's an interface for payment gateway, and you just have to register your version or your payment gateway with Vanilla, and then you can use it.
Okay. That's good to know that as you have already said that you wanted to keep it as modularized or as easily extensible as possible. So I think that's a great feature for the developers, because they can use it any way they want, at their own things, or only get the things they need from vanilla. So right now maybe we can discuss about some things like that. Maybe I developed a platform at the moment, and at the time of development I don't care much about scaling or the performance things, but by the time I release it and my website keeps increasing, there's more and more traffics are coming up, and also there could be millions of products in our e-commerce application. So in that case, like how the scaling thing can be managed with Laravel or with Vanilla, and what could be the possible like challenges?
Okay, so I think here we can drift away from Manilo
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
go back to any solution which
Any,
is built with any kind of software. So
yeah.
as we discussed a couple of years ago, I wrote a blog post about scaling e-commerce and web applications, and I remember, and it's still happening. People are comparing
Yeah.
frameworks, the speed of the frameworks,
Yeah.
and I would say it only makes sense until you're really small, because if you start if your business will start growing and you receive a really significant amount of traffic, and especially when we talk about PHP, you should not use those classical architecture. It doesn't mean that you have to throw away PHP, you have to throw away your relational database, but
Yeah.
you will not survive if each and every page load will hit
Yeah.
PHP. PHP will connect to the database, collect all the data, categorization, everything, like run like dozens or hundreds of queries, and
Yeah.
then you just spit it back. So for that thing, definitely you have to surpass, and you have to go beyond this kind of architecture. The easiest thing you can do, first of all, I think we need to differentiate between read-heavy and write-heavy operations.
Right. Yeah.
Because I would say classical e-commerce sites are,
Read heavy, right?
yeah, they are read-heavy, because how many page loads until a customer buys something? Because buying is a write operation, but browsing through the sites is a read-heavy operation. And if we just consider that a typical conversion ratio with an e-commerce site is something like between 1 and 3%,
Yeah.
and then it means that 97% of the people, they are not writing to your application at all, right? So, but we still have to serve them, because they may or may not be sooner or later customers or buying customers. So let's talk about read-heavy applications first. So coming back here, just think about your last web application. You were loading models, you were loading data from the database, and then you were putting together views and stuff, and then you spit it back to your to the browser. But if you receive thousands of these requests per second, then of course you can still go and buy super expensive Amazon RDS instances or whatever managed databases, or you buy hardware. So that's doable. Of course, it's a good way, but not a very smart one, because then you're still limited to your hardware, and likely it will be unnecessarily expensive. So what you can do here is of course caching, and what you have to do is you need to avoid hitting the request your PHP application.
Okay.
And I think the Symfony HTTP kernel has a very good built-in support for this kind of HTTP caching. So because I would say that's the outmost layer of HTTP caching. I mean the caches, because there is, of course, you can cache your queries, you cache your opcode with PHP. That doesn't matter much. You should avoid hitting your application, that request hitting your application. So for HTTP, I would say use Varnish or something like that, because Varnish is really good for this kind of HTTP caches. So what you can do there is Varnish can cache your pages, and Varnish is a C program sitting in the memory, and it puts everything in the memory. So a typical response time of a varnish page is something like 5 to 15 milliseconds. It's really
and like performant. Yeah.
And basically, if you just take like a $10 DigitalOcean droplet, it will serve you quite many thousands or tens of thousands of users, because it's really not eating any CPU and IO and stuff. So it's really good. So when you think about scaling, then you have to go to Varnish or something similar solution. The other thing is what makes sense is separate your static content from the dynamic content. Yeah. So obviously images and CSS and stuff. Because if for example, if you use just one or two servers, and then these servers are serving also static contents, also the web application, maybe even your SQL database is running on the very same instance or droplet or whatever, then whenever for some reason your application starts dying, then your static content will also die. But if you just separate them, and it's super simple to separate the static content from your dynamic content, that already saves the day, because even if your application is dead, customers may click around and they will still see some contents. Because I unfortunately I was there, and I remember when it happened. And like there were no images on the picture, and when the owner of the company saw that, oh no, it's really died, it's really dead, it fell apart. But actually it looks much better if at least the contents are coming down. So going back to Varnish, there's one. So it's super easy to cache pages with Varnish. But there are just two complex things in computer science. That's naming things and caching validation. So how do you do it with Varnish? We don't have so much time that I go into details, but I would mention two major ideas. Yeah. So for e-commerce, what is changing really quickly is the availability of products. Let's say you are selling iPhones, and you have only 10 pieces left, and it is Black Friday, and all the 10 iPhones are sold. So obviously your e-commerce application or your e-commerce business has a logic around that, and it's happening in the PHP or in the application code, whatever it is, Ruby code. Yeah. And what we used to use, and it's working really well, is that you are tagging pages with the IDs of the products, because in Varnish you can tag pages. Because what Varnish does, it's super simple. It just caches a page, identified by the URL, and it spits back from the cache. And with Varnish you can invalidate the cache. And but imagine this iPhone application or this iPhone you are selling is showing up not just on the single page, but on the category page, maybe on the brand page, and basically you don't know where it is showing up. Maybe there are some category owners who are managing the categories of web shops. They are creating specialized offer pages or whatever. So it basically can show up many pages you are not aware of. So what you can do whenever there is a change to your to the product in your application, should it come from because of buying something, because someone was buying and the product went out of stock, or there was an update on the admin interface, or there was an ERP synchronization script which did something there. Yeah. Then you just send a request to Varnish that I want to invalidate this tag, and whichever page was tagged with this product ID, and then Varnish just bans and it gets invalidated. And this way, it's working very well because you don't have to think about it where your products were. If it's updated, then it gets invalidated. So this is one of the very important ideas when you use HTTP caching. And the second one, of course, is cart and all the customer content. So obviously you have to manage that separately. Here again, I think we don't have the time to go into the details, but the major idea is there are basically two approaches. One of them is so-called ESI. ESI is a non-varnish specific. It's more, I think it's a generic pattern, but that is you can tag with the session or with other ways. You can tag some content which is specific to the customer or the user who is using it. And another thing is for example, if the cart another approach is that you just take the cart and you load it separately. So you have a like a frame of the page, which is common for everyone. But the customer account or the browsing history or the cart of the customer, that you just load this asynchronously with Ajax or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Edge side includes that CSI, and that's also working very well because a cool thing about it is that you can still cache the cards of your customers because you can make with Varnish you can hash the content by session ID. So that means if the customer is browsing through the site and going from page to page, they have their own cart, they have their own like user-based data, but that doesn't have to go to the application and be queried from the database over and over again. So it works the same way. You just tag the cart, and whenever there is a change to the cart, you ban that tag from Varnish, and then it goes away and it gets refreshed. And this way, basically, you can protect your backend application from a really, really significant amount of requests. And this way, I would say it's a life and death difference. Whenever there's a really huge spike in your load, this is really good. Plus, it makes your website really fast because Varnish it's just throwing back things and then super fast. Yeah. So this is my experience that it works very, very good when you have to cache these read operations. Maybe one word about write operations. So that's a trickier topic because you don't have this beautiful Varnish cache which just sits in the memory, written in C, and does the job for you. So whenever you have to scale the write operation, here I would say, of course, you can also go with scaling resources. That always works. But here the big idea, the major idea is that you move whatever you can into asynchronous mode. So if you can avoid writing directly to the database, avoid it. It's not always possible. Most of the time, it's not possible, of course. But if you're talking about APIs, there are a couple of options. For example, someone is posting a request to your API endpoint and saying, "I want to create an order with these parameters." And then what you can do is you create the order, you do write it to the database, you do everything, validate it, and you respond back with 201 created. But in case the business allows it and your architecture allows it, you can also respond back with 204. So you say the request has been accepted. And you just send back the URL or the URI or the ID of the order, which is going to be created. That means obviously you have to use UUID or something like this, and distributed IDs, and you move everything what you can to queues. This is also something you can do here. So that's the basic idea. But whatever you can move to asynchronous, you move it to asynchronous operations.
Okay, and can we just discuss about microservice architecture, like how this can be helpful to implement, categorize these kind of things, like we separate, maybe we know that people will browse through the our catalog or products lots more than they are going into the shopping cart. So can we just separate these two portions, that my shopping cart is another service, and then my browse product catalog is another service. And how, like, do you have any experience, or can you share like how microservice architecture can be implemented in case of this kind of situation, and what could be the pros and cons?
The good thing about microservices is that you can scale your components separately, but actually this is something we very often overlook, that this can be done with monolith as well. Because
Okay.
because imagine you have a monolith, then you can also say I put one instance of the monolith to server A, and that will be responsible for orders only. If you know, if the order subsystem is the one which is really highly loaded, or that has a huge demand of resources, and you can keep the rest somewhere else. And so this is something that there are actually many ideas before going to microservices. But the other thing about microservices is more like the modularity, and I would say the monoliths can be a problem if they are not structured well. And therefore, I can understand why why the microservices architecture was invented. And just referring back to Vanilla, the very first thing what we did for Vanilla was the a subsystem called Concord. Concord is basically a modular a subsystem which helps to create modules within your application, within your monolith application. These modules can be composer packages, or they can be modules within your application. So so if for microservices are for structuring your applications, then think twice going to microservices, because I think if you have to go super simple about microservices, what you have complexity in your application, and the complexity of the code will disappear if you switch from monolith to microservices. But it doesn't mean that your complexity will just disappear, because it will go to the infrastructure. So that means you will have many APIs which are communicating to each other. You completely lose the transactional consistency, and you will go to eventual consistency, meaning you send a request, and it may go through 5 or 6 microservices until so let's say a customer submits the order, and it will go to maybe 5-6 microservices until the order actually gets created. And I don't say it's bad or good or bad. There are pros and cons. So that's what I see, that for a good microservices architecture, you need a very good infrastructure. So most like Mahmoud is asking, what type of problem did you face during working with microservices? Right now, I'm involved in a project where a major Symfony application is being rewritten in Java and with the JHipster framework, so it's a microservices-based architecture. Maybe I could mention that the very first thing here is the infrastructure. So Kubernetes or Istio or ECS or all these kind of like orchestration services are not easy at all, to be honest. I've been reading Kubernetes for months now, and I still don't understand it properly, to be honest. So of course, people who have been working with this microservices architecture for years, obviously they do it really simple. They understand it better. So for them, it's not so complex. But I would say that the biggest challenge here is that your request will go, and maybe you have to deal with
connect all the parts together, how the request is like will be flown, or how the process are all connected, where to put what things. I think that's one of the main challenges, like maybe while planning this thing with
Yeah,
microservice.
another big topic I would say is so imagine you are working with just let's stay with the e-commerce example. So let's say you are working with customers, and you have a microservice for orders, you have a microservice for promotions, which have to take into consideration, and you have an account microservice. Just an example.
Yeah.
And you also have a yeah. So even the cart module, sometimes it has to know about your customer. So what do? Imagine you have a request. Your microservice, like the cart microservice, is receiving a request. I want to add this cart. I want to add this item to my cart. So the cart microservice has to know about the customer, because maybe the customer has a coupon, or I don't know, special rate, or it can depend on the customer.
Yeah.
So these microservices, they are autonomous, meaning there are two options how the cart microservice will be aware of the user or the customer.
Yeah.
A, it will just send an API call to the customer microservice.
Yeah.
B, it has a satellite copy of the customer database locally. And depending on the case, both are valid, but it happens quite often that many microservices are replicating master data or fundamental data to themselves, and that also means it's a kind of code replication, like code duplication. It's happening, and at another team right now there is a project which means code reuse across microservices. So that also means that also shows that there are basically these kind of issues with microservices over there. So that's there. And so going back to the example, if you have to go and query the customer API all the time from the cart API, that means that these two services are basically coupled. That means they are no longer independent. So if for example, if the customer microservice is down, then your cart microservice is also down, and that's something you don't want, because that's what microservices were invented for. So yeah, I would say this. For me, these are the most prominent examples of difficulties with microservices.
Yeah, I think, we can now take some questions from the audience, and maybe we can try to answer those questions. So,
Sure.
Yeah, so let's take a question. Like, I think it will be good to answer from you. Like that, how could someone, you like talked about the vanilla e-commerce framework, and we know that it's e-commerce. The solution is open source. So how, like, if anyone wants to contribute to this vanilla e-commerce framework, do you have any guidance or steps for them?
Yeah, it's actually very straightforward, and thanks for the question. So there are already contributors to the vanilla e-commerce framework, like people who were just figured out that they liked the solution, but there was something which they were missing there.
Yeah.
If you go to vanilla.io, there is a documentation section, and on the left side, there is a contribution. But actually, you don't even have to read it because it's super simple. Let's go to the GitHub repository, and then for the framework, you can just open an issue if you have a bug, or if you want to add a new feature. I would say just open an issue, and then let's discuss, because many people did it already, and they said, well, I would like to have this and that feature, or I would like to have this and that implemented in a specific way, and then there we can discuss. Obviously, it's the very hard part of being an open source maintainer, that sometimes you have to say, no, sorry, but this is out of the scope. You should do this. But even we had a similar request a couple of months ago, I think 2 months ago, and then eventually we could figure out with the person how he can do it himself, and I added some changes to the framework how he could do this specific feature. So even if it won't be added to the core, it makes sense to connect on GitHub, and that also pull requests are accepted. We receive quite many pull requests over there. So yeah, GitHub, that's the major source of contribution.
Place from where they can like start contributing or start at least a discussion from there. I see like there's lots of questions specific to Laravel, but I guess those we can take those questions today, but maybe in a separate session in the upcoming days we may try to take another session on Laravel, but this time maybe I will only keep the questions which are related to the e-commerce. So like few moments back we are talking about like microservice architecture, so I think it goes with that topic that someone has asked, like that what is the best for finding error when using microservices. Maybe he's talking about error debugging or monitoring all the microservices together.
Yeah, first of all, I'm not an expert in microservices at all. So right now I'm leading a team where like technically where they are doing microservices, but still, disclaimer, I'm not an expert. Still, I have an answer for that question that might be useful, but this is so as I mentioned, when you have microservice architecture, then your complexity moves from the code to the infrastructure. That means you have to monitor your infrastructure much better than you used to do that before. So I would say the silver bullet here is unified logging. So if you can, for example, and this is where JHipster is very good at, and the Java in general is very good at, is that it collects all the logs in a unified way. And if you have something like Datadog logging or Log4Rocket or Neuralix new logging tool, or also the classical stack with Kibana and stuff, then that can help a lot, because then you will see all the microservices at once, and then you will be able to see them, like you have a 360-degree overview on what your application is doing. So I would say that can help a lot, because normally we got, especially us PHP developers, we got used to it that we are watching the application's log file. But here with microservices, we talk about
different services in different places.
Yeah, 5, 10, 15, 20, who knows how many microservices which are separate applications.
And yeah, like if you are using like cloud provider services like Amazon or GCP, they have their own like monitoring tools, and there's also a couple of like Attila already mentioned, like Kibana, and there are a couple of others like open source logs management or monitoring tools also available, I guess. And yeah, in our company we use New Relic and Amazon CloudWatch a lot, and this helps us to monitor the logs and find out the errors.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of CloudWatch, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very tough to find or debug from there, but there's also a starting point.
Yes.
Okay, maybe we have some specific questions here. Like someone has asked, like when any user browsing our website and they are doing the shopping cart or wish list, and maybe we store the data. Mostly, like I know that when we are developing a PHP application, mostly we try to store those data in the sessions for while user is ordering or adding products in the cart. So is there any suggestions like what could be best options, cookies, sessions, or table, to add this intermediate data into the shopping cart or wish list? And after the order is complete, what we do with those data?
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually, because it's a very opinionated thing.
Yeah.
So, okay, so there are a couple of approaches. the cart of Vanilla was written in a way that so most of the shops store it in the session. I mean, they store some data in the session. But this is not the only possible way. So the cart was written in a way that you can implement your own storage layer the way you want.
Yeah.
But at the moment, basically, Vanilla is using a combination of session and table. But if you're so it stores them in a database tables because some of the shops they want to deal with abandoned carts. It's very important to send a notification to the customer if it's possible. Also, some shops want to achieve the functionality that when you log on from like you were browsing on your phone, you were logged in, you added something to your cart, and when you log on from your laptop, then you still have it. And this is for these specific things you can use a database very well. So I would say this is a combination of all the three. The typical one is that a shopping cart is stored. So you have a cookie which identifies your session, and then based on the session, you can identify your cart ID in the table in the database. So after the order complete, well, if you want to, it's a good question whether you want to store the cart data after your order is completed or not. It's really up to you if you want to do any analytical thing about it or not. I typically delete the cart. So whenever we create an order from the cart, then I typically delete the cart because then the cart table can really grow huge quickly.
Okay, yeah, I agree. It completely depends on your business goal, because if you want to give the user options that like, for example, I am browsing from my mobile, I added couple of products and I want to keep these same products when I went to browse, I go to browse from my website and I want to see the same products also in my shopping cart. In that case, it's always good to store it in the database. But in some websites, there's also in each session the cart is different, or it gets wiped away when I am starting a new session. So it's up to decide to the developer or the business goal that how you are wanting the user to experience that, how it should be. And yeah, we can take another question, it's related to user roles, that he is asking that if we maybe should I use multiple tables for multiple user roles, or we can go with the built-in user tables for an e-commerce site?
Depending on how complex your permission system is. So I would say you should go with so storing these things in a separate table.
Yeah.
But if it's simple, if for let's say you have 2 or 3 roles, and then your customers are sharing these roles, and it's very straightforward what these roles do, and you don't need granular permission system, then you can also put it just in the user table. But for example, what the Vanilla admin is using it's built on top of the Spati ACL package, and that is using so you have permissions, which permissions are mostly resource level, meaning it's very similar to CRUD. Yeah. Can you delete a user? Can you create a user? Can you list the users? Can you show one user? Can you edit users?
Yeah.
These are the permissions, and you assign them to roles, and then assign roles to users. And in the code, I typically tell my colleagues to avoid hard coding roles in the code level. So because for example, if you are at a certain menu, then you say, okay, in order to open this menu, I want an admin role. Can be okay-ish, but typically roles are being created from the admin area. But you would say listing customers should be rather bound to permissions. Can this user who is currently logged in, can this do this and that, and then yeah,
they can decide. Yeah, like it completely depends on the need, that if the permissions are dynamic and there could be lots of permissions to manage, then it's always better to keep it in the database and manage from there, and it becomes much easier in the long run to manage all these things dynamically, maybe from the admin panel or other places. Yeah, I think these are the questions that we could like mainly talk about today. Yeah, I see like there's a couple of other questions which are related to Laravel, but I think we won't take those today. Maybe if Attila can manage some time in upcoming weeks, we can have another session with Laravel, because you have already said you are working with Laravel with like lots of years and you have good experience with it. So maybe we can discuss about that in the upcoming days. But I guess, yeah, it was a very good session. Yeah.
Maybe one last thing. There is one question we received earlier. The topic, just that one I'd like to answer. So somebody is asking, Symfony or Laravel? Symfony or Laravel? Why? And I would say it doesn't matter. It's up to you. It's like chocolate ice or vanilla ice or strawberry ice cream. It's up to you.
Yeah.
So I would say, of course, if you go to Reddit or Stack Overflow or whatever, Stack Overflow not so much, but Reddit, you will find rants about which is better than the other. And I think it's really up to you. If you like Symfony better, then you go with that. If you like Laravel better, go with that. If you figure out one day that Falcon is your framework, then go with that. So I don't think in order to use a specific technology or tool, you don't have to convince others. And it's very important, because I see that it's very, very widespread that people want to tell that what I'm using, that's the best, or what you're using is bad because this and that.
Yeah.
I feel more respect for all these tools and all these frameworks. So I think Symfony is a super good framework. Also Laravel and many other technologies. I used to work with Yi framework. Send was also, again, as I mentioned, even though I hated Magento to work with it, but it taught me a lot. And without Magento, I wouldn't be here, to be honest. And therefore, I think it's more about respect and it's about yourself. You like it, it goes better with this or that one, then just go with that one. It's okay.
Yeah, I think, you like a point to a very good things to the community, because in lots of cases we found like that one people WordPress is fighting with Joomla, Laravel is fighting with Symfony, but doesn't actually depends on like which is the best. It's all about like which tools you can use to solve your problems at the end of the day. So yeah, thanks for like pointing this out to the audience. And yeah, I think we are also at the end of today's session, and we have a couple of questions, but we'll try to cover this up in another session. And yeah, I want to thank Attila for like giving us your time and share all your previous experiences, knowledge with the audience. And I'm sure that the audience has found your opinions like resourceful or insightful for them. Yeah, so we will like end up today's session now. And yeah, before we close down, if you want to say anything to the audience.
Thank you for listening and have fun. And yeah, if there's anything I can help you, just find me on GitHub or maybe on YouTube on the comment section. So yeah, and then good day, evening, whatever your time zone is. And thanks again for listening.
So also thanks the audience for like listening to us for this whole hour. And yeah, next week we'll be coming back with some other guest with some new topics. In the meantime, yeah, stay connected with us, like us in our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, so that when another new session comes up, you get the notification at first. So yeah, wishing you all like have a pleasant maybe day, night, evening or afternoon. And thanks for listening to us. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.